Okay, so without further ado, Maureen, again, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katie and Liz and the Marion Institute. It's really a pleasure to be with you who are concerned about your children and the well-being of children around our world and in our state, in our town. And so I'm glad to be here. And actually, Creative Lives got our start at the Marion Institute. So it's always wonderful it feels like coming home. We were a serendipity project at the time, years ago in 2012. And support from the Maureen Institute enabled us to begin our after-school lab, where we really field tested our approach and work with parents and family members and begin to train teachers. So years later now, we're a full-fledged nonprofit in Vermont, and we are running a national training program. So thank you again to the Maureen Institute. And another short introduction to Creative Lives is that it really, I think I was on a beach in near the south coast of Massachusetts when I was sitting and thinking about the state of our world and the well-being of children and the well-being of their parents and their teachers. And I got into quite a meditative moment. And in that moment, I heard, do everything you can to support the well-being of children, and begin thinking about teaching other teachers. So at that point, I wasn't quite sure what I should do. I focused in my own career on contemplative education and on creative education because I'm a trained performing artist and have taught for years in public schools and outside of public school settings, from pre-K all the way through college. And I began looking at teaching creativity classes and meditation classes to adults who were working with children. And I didn't feel like it was going far enough or having enough impact. So I went and talked to my longtime meditation teacher, Ellen Tadd, who is a published author and has worked with thousands of people around the world at this point. And Ellen said to me, you know, Maureen, education has a habit of swinging from being focused on the creative well-being of kids and on being ordered and structured and disciplined and able to enter a career in the world. And parenting has that same curve. We can sometimes be focusing on getting our children to be disciplined or letting them rule the roost. So she said, you need a holistic approach. And I think that the holistic approach that's waiting is my understanding of the chakra system and its role in human development. So that's our subject today. We're going to look at Ellen's understanding of the chakra system and its value for parents, teachers, and children. And especially if you're here because you're a parent, that will be our primary focus. But this applies to anyone working with youth. So our mission statement is here on this opening slide. Every child is innately valuable and has a unique potential for learning, contribution, and fulfillment. It's our mission at Creative Lives to help children achieve this potential through attending to their inner lives, their physical health, their cognitive and character development, their relationships with other people, and their connection to the natural world. So let's begin by just taking a moment to appreciate that we're here in an ongoing pandemic, right? It's up and down with how we're dealing with COVID, and you as parents have probably been dealing with children who are in school sometimes and not in school sometimes, either because they're sick or the doors have been shut at school or they're learning remotely. It's been a tumultuous couple of years. It's impacted people emotionally, physically, economically. So I'm so pleased that we're here today to think about how the chakra system can help us navigate not only this time, but even the small decisions in parenting. What is my child eating? What do they love to do? So from the gamut of dealing with big challenges to small ones, let's take a look at the chakras. And as we do, let's also scan out to our world and the state that it's in beyond the pandemic. As our children grow, they're really being exposed to tons of information on the web, in games they play. And as parents, we too are being exposed to thousands of ideas and ways of dealing with problems and ideas for how to help our children thrive. How can we help children navigate this fast-changing world and really develop their attributes, strengthen their weaknesses, and thrive as whole, healthy people? So when I was sitting on that beach, I didn't realize that what I was really looking for was a holistic solution. And that is what Ellen Tatt has provided us with her understanding of the chakra system. Each of the 7 main chakras, which we're going to go through today, has a role to play in how our children do just these things, how they strengthen where they need to strengthen, how they develop their gifts, and how they connect with each other and with the natural world. You can probably remember the very first moment that you held your first child in your arms. When my daughter Emma was born 33 some years ago now, after I got her into my arms, I remember having this rush of emotion and the feeling of connection to my mother, who had died just a year before. And I felt to say, Mom, I understand you now. I get it. Somehow this baby helps me understand what you went through as a parent and how you tried to help us thrive and how you tried to heal things that were not well in your family and help our family grow in ways that you hadn't been able to, well, all the while honoring your parents. So, that moment was seminal for me. As parents, we understand each other in that very core way, that we are here because we, our role as parents, I should say, is to help this child into this world. And it's such a big responsibility. And there's a lot of sacrifice involved, right? We give up doing certain things. We go to bed earlier so that we'll be healthy in the morning for our kids. So what I love about this approach that we're going to look into today is that it not only deals with how we want to help our children, but it also deals with how we help ourselves be the best that we can be as parents. That's a lot to say, being our best. I mean, whenever I say it, oh, I'm doing my best, I have to question it. Am I really? So it's kind of a process, isn't it? I'm working towards being the best I can be. It's a work in progress. I'm not perfect and I'm still learning. That's true for our children too. So we not only get to help them find their way, but by doing so, they're teaching us. So thinking of our children as some of our greatest teachers is a beautiful way to approach parenting. When my second son was born 14 years later, I had a similar rush of emotion holding him in my arms. The first thing the nurse said was, "Oh, look at the little baby man." Just as I was thinking, my gosh, my son looks like a little baby man. And then my son smiled. And the feeling that I had at that moment was how privileged I was to be giving birth in this beautiful setting in Hanover, New Hampshire, in a lovely hospital with care all around me. And at that very moment of feeling that for myself, I had this awareness of all the mothers around the world and what state they might be giving birth in. Where were they? What were their needs being met? What was going on in their community and in their background? So in this way, we as parents, we're truly connected to all the children around the globe. We understand how important our children are. I would love it if, as we get started, I see one thing in the chat already, but if you would pop something into the chat, if you can, that gives me an indication of what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing as a parent, you for yourself. What are some of your challenges? Maybe one that you could pop into the chat. And the other thing I'd like you to pop in there, if you can, is what is one of your deepest desires as a parent for your children? What do you most hope for your kids right now? Okay, so take a minute to do that. And then I'm going to look at what you've shared, talk about it a little bit, and teach you an opening practice from Ellen's work. As you do that, I'll share that one of my challenges as I get older is really letting my son go. He just left for college. And it's a sea change. There's no more child living at home every night. And Daniel is a very independent soul. So he is thoroughly enjoying his autonomy. And I may get a phone call when he needs a little money. But what I'm going to have to be working on with my son is developing a new level of relationship where we're connecting about each other. And he's saying, Mom, how are you? You know, what's going on for you? And I'm quickly asking him, and we're staying current in our relationship. And of course, I'll be there for the needs, but he's an adult now. He's moving into his adulthood. So my relationship with him is changing. And for myself, it's to continue to stay balanced despite the news and knowing the challenges that are out there. So I see a few people have responded in the chat. And let me just open that up, or maybe Katie can read that out for us because I don't seem to be able to access it. Oh, I see it.
You got it?
Yep, I do.
And Maureen, I noticed you have this on one of your slides, so I don't know if you want to transition your slide forward.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. So this next slide is kind of a reflection of what I think of when I think of our parenting right now. We have these tremendous challenges and a sense of urgency about many of them. We also have the opportunity to dive more deeply into our own wisdom, encourage the wisdom of our children, and develop our well-being to handle those. So even though it's a challenging time, there's also huge opportunity. So Liz is saying, ugh, transition to college. So she's also thinking about this transition to college time. And her greatest hope is transitioning them to college so that they can do that well, right? Katie, my biggest challenge is really being present to my kids, tuning into them without distractions. My greatest hope is that they grow feeling loved and secure and loving themselves. These are beautiful. Sometimes when I ask this question of parents, a very common response is, I want my children to really like who they are and be curious to keep learning and growing. I'm afraid that mistakes I've made as a parent can't be corrected. I'm worried that my child isn't doing as well in school as I wish they would. My child doesn't want to be going to school as I hoped they would want to. Their enthusiasm is waning. My child feels as though their self-esteem is diminishing. They were such a confident little person, and now I feel them questioning before they speak. Am I good enough? Is what I want to say important? A friend, Deborah, shares, while I'm not a parent, I care deeply about the well-being of children, those I know and those I don't. I'm very concerned about the challenges children face regarding physical and mental health. One of my desires for children and parents is opportunities for wise tools and supports. Take a moment and think of 1, 2, or more children that you know, whether they're your own or the children of friends or family members who are struggling with a mental health challenge. And if I could see all your hands, I'm guessing that most hands would go up that you know at least 1 or more children who are facing some serious challenges with their mental health or physical health. Our planet has become more and more toxic, unfortunately. The Maureen Institute is doing so much to try to take action on that. So we're working on mental health challenges that are sometimes affected by physical health and sometimes simply by the stresses of being a child in this world right now. Heather has shared her greatest hope is inner peace and the desire to learn and explore, and the challenge being present and balancing it all. So we don't have a very balanced culture, which makes it both more challenging and more wonderful to be working on balance. Because when we work on our own inner balance and wellness and focus as a parent, we are becoming more influential with our children, and that radiates out into all aspects of their lives. So think of our first priority, in a way, as putting that oxygen mask on, like you do when you're being coached on the airline. Put your own mask on first so that you can then help your children. In my approach to teaching and working with the chakras, we start with ourselves. So let's do that and take a look at this beautiful system. So these are some of the questions, and you can continue thinking about these. And then at the end in our Q&A, please feel free to come back and ask a question related to your parenting. I have to move to see my screen. I'm going to start with a story about how my understanding of the chakra system helped me help a child. And then we're going to look at the chakras, and we're going to practice a few techniques together. So Eric was in kindergarten when I worked with him, and had been through the shock of having his mother depart the family 2 years earlier, and he hadn't seen her since. So he was living with his dad and 3 siblings. His dad was struggling with a lot of stress as a single parent, including financial and emotional stress. And Eric had regressed. He was wetting his pants at school. He was easily emotionally upset. And every day he wanted to run to be the first in line, no matter what the line was for. The line to go outside where we had to do a head count, the line to pick up his family style tray to serve his friends at lunch, whatever it was, Eric wanted to be first. And when he wasn't first, he would burst into tears and truly sob. And it wasn't that kind of sobbing where a child's just trying to get their way and manipulate you. It was a feeling of devastation. I watched this behavior for a number of days and tried to help mitigate it. And as I honed in and got more and more clear on about the 5th day of this behavior, I just felt to go and sit with Eric as he cried about not being first in line. And I took his hands and I said, Eric, do you want to be first in line because that's how you know you're special? And there was this kind of long pause as his eyes opened. And then he said with his big bellow, yes! Like, how come you didn't get this already? Of course, that's why. He didn't say all this, but that's what I imagined behind it. This huge yes, and a feeling of relief that finally I understood him. I stayed in my zone. We're going to talk about the zone in just a minute. That zone of focus where you just know, you know. And the next thing I said was, well, I want you to know something. You are special to me, whether you're first in line or 5th in line or at the end of the line. And at the end of the day, when I can't even see you, I still know you're special. You are always special to me just because you are you. And there's nothing that you need to do to prove that you're special. I know it, and I want you to know it too. And Eric got very calm, and these big crocodile tears started down his face. And I said, has anybody ever told you, you know, that you're special just because you are you? And his head shook a bit. And then I said, well, why don't you go get in line now that you know, and see how it feels to be in line. And he got into the end of the line without another fuss. The behavior about wanting to be first went away. There were still other things to do to support Eric, but that feeling of needing to be first to prove that he was special was gone. And the next day, one of my assistants reported in staff meeting, I couldn't believe it. I saw Eric get into line and he was 5th and he wasn't crying. And I said, Eric, you're 5th in line and you're not crying. And he said, I know, Miss B told me I'm special no matter what. no matter where I am in line. So what's wonderful about parenting is our children are growing. They're still young enough to really make transformations more quickly than sometimes happens for us as adults. We can hit into root cause patterns and make changes. So let's take a look at the chakra system and how it helped me work with Eric, my own children, and many other children that I work with. I love this quote from Ellen. This is the lovely Ellen Tadd, who has spent decades gleaning through her own deep looking and listening the way that our chakra system functions in human development. So here in her own words, through my own examination of the chakra system and 40 years of working with students and clients of all ages, I have observed a structure that can help us simplify our understanding of the course of human development and aid us in creating a strategy that supports and endorses the maturation of the whole child. It's beautiful, and I think true based on my now 12 years plus of bringing this work into my own life and with children. So here's a picture of the chakra system as understood by Ellen. Of course, cultures around the world have discerned that there is an energetic system that has to do with how we function in our human lives. Her system most closely aligns with the 7 main chakras as they're discussed in India, but the placement of the third eye chakra is smack dab in the middle of the forehead. So I'm going to walk you through this, and as I do, you can imagine the center for yourself. Inspiration at the top of the head is the main quality of the crown chakra. Each chakra has many nuanced aspects, but it also has an emphasis. So on the left side, you see the emphasis of the chakra, and the right side, the name. The crown chakra at the top of the head has to do with inspiration, but it also has to do with enthusiasm, devotion, spontaneity, and a feeling of being happy from the inside out. When children have a well-functioning crown chakra, they feel glad to be alive. They feel an experience of connection. And they're inspired by many things. Do you remember when your children are small and they're showing you something like a pen and saying, pen, rock, horse, kitty? It's all new. So there is a feeling of newness when the crown chakra is open that can make even the daily chores of parenting feel happy. When we marry inspiration with discipline in the daily things, we have a winning combo there. So the crown chakra, inspiration, devotion, connection, inspired by many things. And it also is a sense of trust, really a trust in the process of life, that I'm part of life and I'm learning. Everyone's part of life, everyone's learning, and capable of fun. As children age, this crown chakra can become more diminished for many reasons in our culture. And if your child is feeling discouraged or contracted, depressed, or has trouble being spontaneous, that's a sense of a diminished crown. In our courses, we look deeply into each aspect of the crown and what we can do to help it stay working well. The other problem that can happen in the crown is it can be dominant. And if it's dominant, a child is getting so excited that they may not be making good decisions or attending to the details. The next chakra is the kingpin of the system. Ellen calls it this because, like when you're bowling, if you strike the perfect pin, all the other pins go down. The third eye chakra has a lot to do with keeping well function across the chakra system. It's a kingpin to the well function of the system. When it's integrated well, it helps all the other chakras work well. It's located right smack dab in the middle of the forehead. So take a little moment as I'm talking about this and find a point in the room, a small, tiny point that you can stare at. And as you're staring at that point, imagine that right in the middle of your forehead, there is a miner's light that opens up. A window, if you will, and that you're gently pushing your focus right through that window to the point so that you have the feeling of almost having 3 eyes open. 1, 2, 3. Staring at a point is one of the simplest ways to engage the third eye, but it also gets engaged when we do anything that requires focus. So as we're parenting, we want to be watching for what inspires our children. What gives them that wow feeling of, I want to know more about this. And what do they want to focus on? Often those two things are paired, right? They love to focus on what inspires them. And they could spend hours at a time building a Lego structure, or learning a new physical skill in soccer, or tackling a math challenge if they're inspired and engaged with their focus. So when the focus center is open, we are discerning and we are able to see the consequences of our actions. That's true even for a young child. They begin to realize that if they throw a block at their sister will cry. And as they get older, we want to help that center get more and more stronger, engaged, and integrated with the other centers. When the third eye is diminished, children can have a feeling of not being able to retain learning because they're not focused enough to remember. They can easily become distracted. They may not do well in school. They may show symptoms of ADHD or ADD. So a question for parents that we work on in our courses is, what can I do to help strengthen focus in my child? Where is my child focusing easily? How can I help that focus translate to where it's more challenging? The next chakra is the chakra of self-esteem, the throat chakra. And that deals with our feeling about who we are from the inside out. So it's confidence in our own value. We want our children to know they're good because they are, not because they did something or they didn't do something. A key to health in this chakra is differentiating self-esteem from behavior. So if a child is misbehaving, we're wanting to address the behavior while also communicating with them, you are good because you are. You're good, but I want to help you act in a way that's wise for yourself and wise for other people. So we need to address this behavior. A diminished throat is a feeling of I'm not good enough, and it can cause children to pull back and not express themselves verbally. A dominant throat is a feeling of I want to prove I'm good, so I'm going to try to be better than you, or I may even start putting you down. It can lead to being a bully. When the throat chakra is diminished or dominant, we can have a feeling of aversion to criticism. That's really a big deal in our culture. Our throat chakra culturally is quite weak, so we are averse to addressing our weaknesses and our mistakes honestly in order that we can grow. But when the throat is healthy, we want to know, we want the feedback because we want to grow. We're curious. Curiosity, self-esteem, feeling of confidence in oneself. These are the throat chakra. Moving down to the heart chakra, the center is about love. And even though in our culture we talk a lot about follow your heart, the heart is not discerning. It's a radiator of love and care. And when it's working well, it's integrated with the chakra system. So the third eye will tell the heart the appropriate way to express love. This is one of Ellen's key definitions. Love is this warm, unifying force that radiates from the heart and helps us all feel connected and glad to be alive and warmly and wanting the best for each other. But the third eye tells us what is loving, and that is doing what helps another to grow or helps ourselves to grow. So with our children, we want to feel love, but we also want to know what is the loving thing to do to support my child's growth and development right now. What are the consequences if I do this or if I do that? Emotional well-being is the center below the heart chakra. But before I move on, let me say one more thing about the heart. When it's diminished, children start losing the feeling of wanting to be loving to other people. They can be focused on emotional hurt, be self-protective. They have less of an easy time expressing joy. They may feel jealous. When the heart chakra is dominant, children can be overly generous. They give toys away willy-nilly or are trying to support what their friends want without thinking about what's best for them. And they can also use giving as a form of manipulation. Hi, Mom, how are you? I'm so glad to see you. How's everything going, Mom? And, you know, I really need $100 to buy that bike I've been wanting. So a well-functioning heart is integrated with the third eye's wisdom and is open and loving and also loving to oneself. Going down to the solar plexus, this area is where we feel emotional equilibrium, a feeling of empathy. When our emotions are aligned with our clarity, our emotions stay more steady. We may feel angry, but it's tempered by understanding what to do about the anger. We may feel sad, but we're not overwhelmed by it. So think of emotional well-being as a critical part of children's development. And what will help it the most is to help children realize that they can place their focus in the middle of their forehead in what I call their wise view, or you could call it their miner's light. And that clarity will help temper their emotion. We're going to come back and practice the TAD technique in just a moment, but let's continue down the chakra system. The TAD technique is the comparison of what it's like to be focused in the belly versus what it's like when we're focused here. So we'll practice that today so you can have a sense of that. The next chakra down, Ellen names it the persona in the world chakra, the identity chakra, she calls it, and it deals with our persona in the world. The identity chakra is all about feeling the balance of our receptive and our directive sides. If the emotional center above it is dominant and children are very reactive and constantly in their feelings and gunning for what they want, that can droop over into the persona in the world chakra. If the solar plexus chakra is diminished and children are not feeling much empathy for other people and they're tight in their feelings, that can also affect their persona in the world because they'll be less empathetic in relationship. So dominance and diminishment in each chakra has an impact on the whole system. In the identity chakra, this is kind of it. We're in a woman's body where the ovaries are, and in a comparable space in other bodies, this feeling of I can give and I can receive, I can act and I can wait, I can lead and I can follow, I can speak and I can listen, I'm sensitive and I'm strong, balance. And I'm confident in bringing myself into the world and expressing my creativity with other people and relating with other people. In the center, a dominance would be more typical in our world, which is trying to have one's, striving to do versus taking care of, nurturing, and sustaining. So when this side is dominant, people can become aggressive, pushy, feel overly responsible, perhaps, have a more challenge listening to other people, be more demanding, or typical in children as they get into their teen years, they can become rebellious if they don't feel supported in who they are in the world. They can begin to rebel or they can begin to conform. So a diminished persona in the world would be a child who is feeling like they want to be more passive, they may be lonely, they feel a lack of confidence, they tend to blend to the will of others, and there's a feeling of unfulfillment. This can be a common, either way, this chakra can be commonly out of balance in the teenage years. And that some of that is natural. They're trying to work to know who they are as they relate. And some of it could be improved quite a bit by strategies from the chakra system framework. So lastly, we have the center of discipline, which opens down into the ground. And it deals with all the details of our daily life. And a healthy base chakra would be developing as children grow, because when we have little babies, they don't have much of a base. We take care of everything for them. So as parents, it's one of our primary responsibilities to help them gain skills across all aspects of their lives. As they build strength in their inner life, that helps their base chakra. The repetition, the hard work factor, the willingness to keep going when the going gets rough, and building skills over time builds a healthy base, which helps balance the inspiration in the crown. And all of that's facilitated by good focus in the third eye. So that is an overview of the chakra system. And I see we have about 20 minutes left. So I think what we'll do is take 4 minutes or so and practice the TAD technique. I may ask you to write some results in the chat if you're willing. But I want you to think of an issue that's been challenging you in your parenting, something that you would love an insight about. Maybe it has to do with a problem your child is going through, or a way that you want to communicate with them about something challenging. Maybe it has to do with their performance in school. Find something that has been challenging for you. Put your hand on your belly. Close your eyes. And put your focus right in your belly, above the belly button and below the rib cage in your solar plexus area. And keeping your focus there, I want you to imagine how you deal with this challenge. How do you feel? What do you do? How do you interact? How do you move forward when you're focused in your belly? And then just feeling a sense of acceptance for whatever you've experienced while focused in your belly. I want you to imagine that you can lift your focus like an elevator right up through your torso and through your chest and up through your throat, and tap the middle of your forehead and bring your focus right to that point. Imagine a window is open and you're moving your focus through that point and looking at the very same situation now, while keeping your focus in the third eye chakra. What's the difference? When you're focused in your third eye, how do you tackle the challenge? What do you do? How do you feel? What do you perceive about the situation? Good. You know, if you have had enough time to do that comparison and you want to put something into the chat about the difference, please go ahead and do that. I can share some of what you are sharing, or we're in the Q&A time, so it'd be perfectly fine for Katie to take over, and maybe somebody wants to speak up about this, and I'll take some of your questions. This was a pretty fast overview of the chakra system, but I want to close this lecture part by saying that every one of these centers is critical to how our children are doing in their lives. Every center plays a role. That's important. And when we understand how these centers work through some study and practice, we better understand not only our children, but ourselves and our relationship with them. I have found no other system that is as complete in addressing every aspect of the child, or as helpful to me in organizing what I already know, adding what's missing from my parenting approach, tuning up some things that could be improved on, and then even coming up with new ways of helping my child get focused or gain better esteem. So I'm passionate about it, and I'm delighted to talk with you a little bit more about it. So please, if you have questions or you had an insight come to you that you want to share or put into the chat, we will go into Q&A with Katie. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and unshare just so we have a bit more of a group dynamic. All right, so some questions for you, Maureen. And again, going back to kind of the topic of today, thinking about how difficult the last few years, I mean, it's in general, you kind of highlighted some of the challenges of the era with technology and social media and pace and things like this, but also thinking about COVID and the social dislocation that has been kind of amplified by that. I'm wondering what you're seeing as some of the kind of major problems in supporting the healthy development of children and adolescents.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where kids live, one of the big things that happened during COVID is a lot of kids were inside a lot more because their major place of play was the playground at school.
Mm-hmm.
And their major place of interacting with other children was in a school setting or in a daycare setting. So that has so many impacts, right? I'm sure as parents and mental health professionals or teachers, you have seen the impact being a feeling of diminishment in some of those centers we talked about, expressing creativity, feeling enthused about getting up in the morning, and learning as well when online, for instance, or wearing a mask. When you're a small child and a person is masked and you're not seeing the smile or the, it's harder to read faces. And so, you know, I think of parents and teachers having to kind of moving back into more, but not fully normal interacting. There needs to be some makeup time, some acknowledgement that this was hard, some bringing to the fore of the social, emotional relationships, the identity chakra. Who am I? How am I with you? Reviewing of skills that didn't get practiced as much in that off time. I'm sure some of you can really relate to seeing some serious impact on kids. So when that happens, when there's a major event in the world, we have to go to our third eye and say, okay, given what happened, what do I do? What adjustments do I need to make as my students are returning or as I'm parenting to offset this huge challenge? It's a reboot for everybody. And I think kids can be more engaged in the rebooting process as they get older. I've taught this TAD technique that I just shared with you with very small children, with third graders, second graders, first graders, and iterations of it with preschoolers. Kids have a lot of wisdom about what they need. All we need to do is help them access that focus, and the wisdom comes to the fore.
Yeah. I think full disclosure, you know, I'd taken your class before, and I have a daughter, she's now 10, and, you know, she becomes dysregulated from time to time, but it's almost like it's very hard to get her to kind of bring it back. And one of the things that we had talked about, I think, is a question you'd posed to the group, and you brought it up today, what gets your child to focus? And when we had figured out what got my daughter to focus, even if I couldn't get her to do the TAD technique, maybe she just was too kind of disembodied in the moment to do that, or unfocused to do that. Getting her to focus on piano, for instance, brought her head to a whole different space. So that's something kind of we use as a bypass when the TAD technique is not something we're able to accomplish in a moment. You know, I think that's another great point that you raised, which is what at least gets your person to focus. And frankly, I use it for myself when I'm feeling emotionally imbalanced in some area, or one of my chakras, whatever expression of that imbalance I'm feeling. I find focusing on something quite helpful, just to kind of allow things to settle down, and then I can go back and evaluate and move forward. But I don't, my question though was sent to this point, to the same line, I know you work with practitioners, educators, I know you work with parents. What are people doing? Maybe that is even different, or kind of an offshoot of these things that has been effective.
The teachers, I've been working with a group of teachers teaching at Castleton University this summer, and several of them said that the last year was one of the hardest years of teaching they'd ever experienced. And there's a lot more job insecurity in the early care profession, because here in Vermont, we have a lack of professionals ready to step into positions if people leave. So many people left, and now there's this job insecurity, and will I be able to meet the needs of my children? And furthermore, how can I help them be more regulated, because they've all been through a lot. So what Katie's saying is really important. In our class, we've discovered that helping ourselves know the difference between being focused in the solar plexus and focused here is the first big step, and also really working on what inspires us every day and following through. So if life is overwhelming, we can focus on being inspired and devoted to making change, and then focus on the third eye and the implementation of what we see as a really simple go-to. And that's true for kids. If they're overwhelmed, or there's a classroom of children who are overwhelmed, or if your own children are really struggling, what inspires them? How can you help them get focused? And then how can you help them work on those muscles, right? And that will help the other centers come into regulation. Katie's also mentioning kind of an overt use of the TAD technique, although I taught it very deliberately to you. Focus in the solar plexus, take the elevator up, focus in the third eye. If a child's out of balance and you can't really get them to sit there and focus in your solar plexus, or if they're too small to really follow that instruction, you're really using the TAD technique if you're introducing them back to something that brings them to focus. Then when they're focused is the time to talk to them about the behavior or what they need. But when they're really distraught or emotional or acting out or not regulated, the first goal is to reopen the crown chakra so that they're feeling some trust and get them back to focus. And that would be true no matter what's going on, whether it's the pandemic or a change in the home environment. I'm reading Crystal's note here that she's a mental health counselor. And one of the biggest challenges is understanding the children I work with and understanding the family dynamics. So in our training program, we start to look at a child's strengths and weaknesses across the chakra system as a major and fundamental way to understand what's making them tick. It was a sea change for me when I began to use it this way and work with my team this way. And together we would meditate, focus in our third eye, and look at a child and each come up with insights that were helpful. And then a shared practice. So then we could also engage the parents in the same thing. What do you see? Let's work on this together. And here's what we see. I also have shared the basics of the chakra system with parents and had them say, where did you learn this? I've never looked at my child like this. This is so helpful. I feel like I understand my child better just after this one session with you. It was a typical after school parent teacher conference kind of setting. So I find that the chakra system is intuitively easy for people to understand because we all have a chakra system and it's functioning and we can feel its function whether we fully understand it. So yes, I hope that's helpful.
No, it is helpful. And I think, again, knowing the settings that you're working in, I think people kind of have manifested these in different ways and developed strategies appropriate for their settings. I'd love to explore that. However, I think what's important to note is that you do have trainings, right? You just were talking about it. So before we turn to anything else, will you just quickly, if people are curious for more, because as you've even said, this is such a brief overview and there is frankly a lot here that could function as resources for parents, for teachers. Will you talk about the different places people can go to learn more, to train, etc.?
Yeah. And I even have a slide, I think, towards the end, Katie, if you want to, but we can share that at the end and you can take some notes. So our website is creativelives.org. And on that website, you can learn more about the chakra system. You can also go online and purchase Ellen's fundamental book. Her first book about the chakras, The Wisdom of the Chakras, Tools for Navigating the Complexity of Life. This also refers to her overall cosmology and spiritual perspective. But the important thing is to glean how the chakras function. This is also a text in our courses. So coming up, I have a 3-hour workshop on October, the first Saturday in October, I think, and that is very inexpensive for a parent or a professional to come to and go more deeply into some of the techniques. It's a lovely introduction. But if you're already intrigued, we have space in our 9-week training course, which begins September 19th, online on Zoom. We have a learning portal where you go in and find your resources, and it's about an hour. It's an hour and a half Zoom class once a week for 9 weeks, plus about 3 hours, maybe a little bit more than that, of work with writing, reading, and working with a partner in the class. Really, really helpful way to get the system more in your bones and understand it for yourself first. Then we have a second training which helps you implement it with children. So our foundations 1 and 2 are our primary courses for getting this in your bones, and they're designed to help you do it in a, in a reasonable pace, in a way that helps you really understand, experience, and implement.
Great. Okay. And I will dig up, is it creativelives.org?
It is.
Okay.
www.creativelives.org, and then you can explore the approach. We have some examples from the field, but you can also go straight to our programs tab and find out what we're doing with our national training program. We are also interested in training people who would like to become facilitators of this approach, because there is so much need right now for holistic education and a deep holistic understanding of human development. And based on our experiences in the field and our results with teachers, I can say that I think it will really be taking off and expanding. And the way to do that is to have a team of trainers. So all of those opportunities are there. I was using the TAT technique. I was talking today. I didn't sleep well last night. In the middle of going through the chakras and hitting the solar plexus, I could feel myself losing my focus and bringing it back to a point. So the point of this work is not that we become enlightened. It's that we have tools for getting back into the zone when we lose it. And that we learn as a parent, as a teacher, as a professional, to be both reflective and active in our work. My big lesson in life is to reflect and then act. And when I do, the results are always better. So Katie had another question that I thought you might like to. Katie, before you'd asked, what tools or strategies are effective at restoring balance in teens? And if these are different from children, why is this so?
Mm-hmm.
So think about ourselves as adults and our habits deepening over time. If we have missed some aspects of the chakra development in young children, by the time they're teens, those can be exacerbated. So it can be a little bit, and teens are so hyper aware of everyone's of their relationships with other people. So they can become a little bit more shy about speaking up in class. So if their crown chakra has begun to close, or they've lost focus in their third eye, that can actually get worse. And one of the things that makes it really hard in school is competition. It's one of the primary problems, is this feeling of competition. I'm not going as far, as fast as somebody else, or I need to be better than someone else, or I'm comparing how I look, what I have, how I do, this comparison of myself to gain value, to know that I'm valuable, is a huge factor for teens.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one thing we want to work on mitigating as adults. How can we help children know that they're valuable and feel good about what they're learning, be honest about their mistakes, and not feel so competitive with each other? It's not their fault. It's a very competitive world. It's modeled all around them. And it's one of the really deep challenges, as well as how can we help them be healthy in an unhealthy world, right?
Mhm. I
Okay.
think that underscores the point too, Maureen, which is, if we want to support kids in doing this work and develop our own techniques and strategies, we kind of have to understand it for ourselves first. So I appreciate you sharing some mention of the different programs you have going on. If people are interested in learning more, Alan's book, of course. And I just think, and Crystal raised the point in her comment earlier as well, it's in the context of a family or a group dynamic or whatnot, that all of these interactions and this development is taking place. So it's incumbent on us, I think, to learn. With that said, I am conscious that we're coming up on time. So again, I encourage you, if you would like to know more, please do visit Maureen's site, learn about the work that she and her staff are doing. There's quite a lot that they have going on at any one time and plenty of opportunities to learn. In addition, we'll post the resources from today by next Tuesday on our website. In fact, they might go up sooner. So slides, the video. So if you wish to share it with anyone you know who might be interested, please do. We'll send an email to all those who registered. And lastly, we'd love to have you join us next month on October 4th, when we'll be joined by Dr. Jeff Drobot and his partner Guy Odeshaw, speaking about the prevention of cognitive decline, using some advances in technology available today. That said, Maureen, we're very grateful for your time. And
yeah, what a
your
pleasure.
expertise.
And yes, thank you for being here today. And please reach out if you have any questions to me at info@creativelives.org. I'm happy to continue the chat.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.